Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the United District podcast. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, but we're back today just before the return of Premier League football. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the European Lad, Ajax Twitter account. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
It's really good to have you on, and obviously quite a lot of interesting stuff going on at the minute. Football is enduring a very turbulent time, with both obviously transfers now starting to pick back up, the game obviously picking back up. Just on a personal level, how have you been over these past few months?
How have I personally been?
Yeah, how have you been coping
fine.
with it all? Yeah,
I've been fine, man. It was tough with the lockdown at first because you got bored with no football. I would have been fine if there was football on TV, but with no football, it's a lot tougher.
Yeah.
But then again, there are a lot of people who are struggling financially and in terms of health, so they must have had it a lot harder than me. So I've been fine.
Yeah, that's fair enough. One of the main reasons we've got you on is to discuss Donny van de Beek, a man who's been increasingly linked to Manchester United in recent weeks. Edwin van der Sar confirmed that there is an interest on our side. I have to ask.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I have to ask. What do you think of the rumours as a whole, and what do you think about the likelihood of him coming to Manchester United?
Well, the reports they go all the way back to last summer.
Yeah.
Last summer, as all the reliable reports wrote, there was an agreement between Real Madrid and Donny van de Beek, and with Real Madrid and Ajax, and everything was done. So, but the same thing that's happening now was happening then, which is Real Madrid, they didn't want to pull that final trigger. They didn't want to pay the money, which is 50 or 60 million. They just didn't pay it. And back then, the reports said that this was because of Paul Pogba. And as you probably know, with every United fan probably knows, that Paul Pogba is a big target especially for Zidane, for Real Madrid in general, but Zidane really loves him. And that was their number one target instead of Donny van de Beek. So that lasted all summer long, last summer. And eventually, Donny decided to let Ajax know that he was going to stay for just one more season, while agreeing with Ajax that he would be allowed to leave this summer, the summer when we're in now. So the agreement with Real Madrid was done, and it was all just clear that they could pull it off this summer. And I remember around December, the reliable Dutch Telegraph stated, and I actually have this report in front of me right now. I searched it up for this podcast. They reported that from the 1st of July 2020, Donny van de Beek will become a Real Madrid player. And bear in mind, this is the same paper that broke the news last weekend with Man United being interested in Donny van de Beek. So when it comes to transfers, this is a really reliable source. They broke the news with Ziyech to Chelsea, for example. They broke the Tadic to Ajax news, the Daily Blind to Ajax. Every time there's a scoop or there's a big deal, they are the first to announce it.
Right.
So, now we're in this summer, and the same source has been stated that Real Madrid is not willing to make the payment now, but this time it's because of a different reason. Because the coronavirus struck really hard in the city of Madrid, and lots of people are struggling. And for them to make a 50, 60 million signing while the city is in so much financial pain, it's just, it's not the right time. That's what they're writing. So both the Spanish papers write it and the reliable papers here, they say it's just not the right time, and it would most likely damage their image a lot. And that's where Man United come in, They, last week, Saturday night, they broke the news that they want to try to sign him, and that they started talks with Ajax and with Donny van de Beek. And Donny himself would be open for a move there. So that's the current situation. So the current situation is more of a question mark. Like, will Donny van de Beek again wait for Real Madrid? Does he have that patience? Or will he eventually decide to let that dream go and go for Man United instead? That's how I see the situation right now. Or will he? Sorry.
No, go on.
You go.
No, that's fine.
Or will he decide to stay for yet another year? Which is still it's an option people forget, but it's still an option. I think it's the last option. I think it's it's not really a big chance of happening, but it's still an option, and I would love it, obviously, but I don't think it's going to happen.
On a personal level, do you think Van der Beek had his heart set on a move to Madrid? Do you think that's something that's going to hang over him? Do you think that will hang over him then? Yeah,
definitely. He always had Madrid in his mind, but it's taking so long, and that's what I meant with what I said. It's going to be, his patience is going to be tested a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because over the years, obviously, Manchester United at one point was the pinnacle of the world. Obviously, Madrid have always been a big club as well, and when you've got those two clubs sniffing around you, it's interesting at the minute whether
it's incredible.
Yeah, whether he's got that sort of that dream move as Cristiano Ronaldo obviously had to Madrid, or whether he buy into the project that we're trying to create at United. As an Ajax fan, having watched him develop, I'm sure you've got an opinion on where you'd like him to end up, obviously, because you want him to succeed as a product of the club you support.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you prefer him to come to England and play for United under Solskjaer, or do you think the Madrid move would be better for his career?
It's a tough question. I don't really have a preference. I watch both Premier League and La Liga, and what I always say is I just want to watch him play football, you know. And with, for example, Matthijs de Ligt went to Serie A, and although Juventus is a great club, I was a bit, wouldn't say sad, but I would have preferred him to go to La Liga or England, because those leagues, in my opinion, are more attractive to watch. So from that point of view, I would give my opinion, but because I both like La Liga and Premier League, I don't really have a preference. But it does look like Real Madrid doesn't really see him as a high priority and a most-wanted player, you know, because I think they would have, if that would have been the case, they would have been signing him straight away last summer already. And it just looks like they're toying around with him, that they're not really seeing him as a main priority. And I hope that's not the case. I hope that they're not toying around with him, because if that's the case, then I would definitely prefer Man United, because at least they show that they're really wanting. That's also important.
Do you think just going back to the point of Edwin van der Sar obviously involved as I think what is his role? Technical director at Ajax? Is that his title? Edwin van der Sar at Ajax, technical director?
I don't really know how to say the term in English.
Oh, okay. I think it's something along those sort of lines, isn't it? He's obviously. Do you think he's going to have a say in the move?
Yeah, well, his connection with Man United is obviously going to play a role with Woodward and with his past there at the club. So it plays a role in terms of that they can just start talks with Van der Sar, and in that way, you know, it's just good to have for United someone like him.
Yeah, and going on to Van der Beek as a player, obviously, tactically and his sort of role. Do you think how would he fit in at United? What type of player is Donny van der Beek? To sum up for anyone who obviously hasn't watched him all that much.
Well, have you watched him in the Champions League last year?
I've seen him in the Champions League, yeah, but I've got to say I don't watch much Eredivisie to be quite honest. Yeah, I
understand. But in the Champions League, that's where he really showed himself to the world, in that role, in that position, and. It's close to the box. It's inside the box. It's just in that area, you know. He's a great awareness of what's happening around him. He can assist. He can score goals. So I don't really have a specific position for him, but just in that role, I love him the most.
Yeah.
So not really defensive midfielder. He can play that role, defensive midfielder, but that's not the way he showed himself to the world.
I think that's part of the debate that's been going on around him, and something I've personally brought up is whether he's actually what we need at the minute. Obviously, we've got an array of what you'd say is possibly a bit more progressive midfielders. We've obviously got Fred, Pogba, Bruno Fernandes, just to name a few. Scott McTominay isn't exactly a base of midfield, and it's just whether the next midfielder we sign should be someone to replace Nemanja Matic as a base of that midfield who can obviously free up those around him. Do you think, obviously you've said there that he's perhaps more progressive in and around the box. Do you think he's got that ability to play at the base of midfield, like consistently?
He has the ability to play there, yeah. But like I said, I would not prefer him there. His qualities are way more. How do you say that? His qualities show off a lot more in that area that I just described. He has played there before in the role you just described, but it's not his strongest aspect of his game, in my opinion.
Yeah. Just finally, out from the outside looking in at Manchester United, I've asked this to quite a few people who we've had on. Obviously, not a few of them not associated at all with United. You being one of them. How do you see United's project from the outside looking in? Do you think it's looking good for United? Do you think Solskjaer's building something meaningful? What are your thoughts on the whole sort of project that's United has obviously put into?
I'm not a really. I do watch every United game, but I'm not a very strong follower of their how do you say that, philosophy or the way the direction they want to go. But I was watching their squad the other day, and you have Pogba, Bruno Fernandes, McTominay, Mata, Pereira, Fred. You have so many options in midfield, and I was just wondering what he's gonna do with that. What formation he wants to play and how he wants to fit in Donny van de Beek. That's not something I can answer, but I was just wondering how Solskjaer was gonna be able to work that out with so many options.
That's definitely something that I think a lot of United fans have discussed as well.
Do you think it's going to be Pogba and then Bruno Fernandes for sure in the main starting 11?
I think so. It all depends really, because I think a lot of people have suggested a midfield of Bruno, Fernandes, Pogba and Fred, which I personally don't think has got enough defensive cover to it.
Fred has been good this season, hasn't he?
He has. Fred's been excellent. Yeah, Fred's been really good. It's just whether Fred's got that ability to play as the base midfield, which we know Matic has got, and that's why I think our best midfield, if you want, because it's so hard. You've got to play both Pogba and Bruno in my eyes. They're two of the most talented players at the club, and in order to play those two together, especially in a midfield three, and we know Pogba can't really play at a pivot, so that removes the option of a 4-2-3-1 really, is you've got to have someone who can free those two up, and that's why I'm a bit surprised at Van de Beek being our priority, as a Matic replacement would seem more in check, a Thomas Partey type figure, somebody like that at the base. So that has really surprised me, to be honest. Yeah,
I understand. That's what I meant with you have so many options, but then again, Real Madrid has that. Real Madrid has Modric, Casemiro, Kroos, who else? Isco, and then obviously Valverde has had a tremendous development this season, and that hasn't been said in any report. But I think the development of Valverde could have just been a factor in them not wanting to sign Van de Beek anymore, because they didn't expect his development to be that good. Valverde's development. Yeah. So maybe that plays a role in it as well.
Do you think playing time is something that he'll obviously it's something he will look at? Do you
think,
definitely. As you say with Valverde there and the array of Madrid midfielders, although some of them getting on now, obviously Modric and Kroos approaching the sort of the back leg of their career. Do you think that he'd get the game time he requires at Real Madrid? Because obviously I think United we could perhaps maybe guarantee him obviously more game time than Madrid.
Well, Look, I always think of Zidane when someone asks this question. I'm not sure if Zidane really is a fan of Donny van de Beek, because last summer it already showed that Van de Beek was option number 2 for him instead of Pogba. And I'm just not sure if Zidane really wants to have Van de Beek in his squad. And even if he does want to have him in his squad, I have my doubts about whether he want to use him a lot in the first team. Well, in the first 11, sorry.
That's the thing at Real Madrid. You've got that dynamic, haven't you, between Florentino Perez, who's got a whole mind of his own, I think, really, with transfers.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And then Zidane, that sort of perhaps a clash of ideology there. That sometimes
that's exactly what I meant. There's like difference between them. And I do think the board would want Van de Beek, but then does Zidane really want to use him a lot? That's my main doubt.
obviously there's always marketing assumed with these things as well, and United obviously haven't got we haven't got that massive Dutch contingency anymore like we have in past squads. Obviously Van Persie became an icon of the club, and obviously Van Nistelrooy, exactly, yeah, Van Nistelrooy, Van der Sar and the like. So you think that's probably something that's at the back of both clubs' minds, to be honest. So.
Alexander Budner.
Yeah, that's right, Alex Budner. I'm glad you've remembered that, man. Not many do, I don't think, but good left peg on him. To be fair, good left peg on that man.
Yeah, it didn't really work out though.
No, it didn't. It didn't, unfortunately. Hopefully, Van der Beek is a bit different if he does end up coming. The European Lad, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for coming on.
Okay, man, no problem.
To discuss Van der Beek. Really appreciate that. Have you got any final words you want to say to anyone listening?
No, not really.
No, that's right.
No, nothing to say, man.
Everyone go and follow.
Well, it was good to be on here. Thank you for that.
No, thanks for coming on, and it's brilliant to hear a different perspective sometimes. Get an outside view of everything. Everyone go and follow at the European Lad on Twitter. By the way, just before we sign off. Anyway, thank you for coming on, mate.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
No problem. See you. I'm
now delighted to bring on the second guest of today's podcast. We're doing it a bit differently today, mixing it up a little bit. Asif, aka Asif9707, as he's known on Twitter. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks for that, mate. Thanks for having me on today.
No, it's great to have you on, and obviously, really interesting times at the minute. I know people are probably getting bored of me saying that on this podcast, but everyone's coping in different ways. How have you personally been getting on with it all?
Well, I've just been busy with work, family, and friends, to be honest. So it's been quite all right, to be honest. Better than how it was at the start. At the start, obviously, being away from work and not being able to see family and friends, it just get a bit boring and just like a bit of a lazy routine and everything. But it's been really much better, to be honest, the last month or so.
No, that's good to hear. Right, first off, I think we have to discuss the return of the Premier League, which is now just around the corner, obviously, in just a week's time or under a week's time. Do you think the whole situation has been dealt with well by the Premier League? How do you think, the whole thing, obviously, it's a very tough thing to deal with, and a lot of people have different opinions on how it's been dealt with. How do you think, in your opinion, the Premier League has dealt with the whole situation?
Obviously, the players' health and safety, as well as the referees and everyone else that's going to be on and off the pitch, that has to come as a huge priority. So I feel it's been done really well, if I'm being honest, because at the start of the situation, they were actually planning on bringing it back in at the middle of May, towards the end of May. Now it's going to be middle of June. Well, next week it will be just after middle of June. So I think they've just taken their time, really. They don't want to rush into any big decisions that could cause any issues with the players and everyone else. I think they've just done it really well, and it's like, obviously the situation in England is a bit worse than the other countries around Europe, but we've seen like the situation like Germany, Italy, Spain being much better, and with the numbers and figures in terms of England, it's been much better than how it was since the March, April time. So I think they've brought it back a good timing, because it would have been a bit difficult to see how they would have started the next season. It would have maybe brought it out towards the end of the year. So it's going to be difficult seeing like United playing a couple of days, like a game every few days, in terms of the players' fitness. But it is what it is. The main priority is just to try finishing this season off before August, or I'd say by the end of August. But I think is the situation, it does make it a bit awkward as fans. Like, you want to see the football being played consistently at the top level, but you might not just see that anymore because of how the games will have to be like played with a bit of like just a huge difficulty in running out of these fixtures, really.
I think you make a good point on fitness, actually, and it's not something that I'd really personally thought about, in the fitter sides, and obviously I think we are considered on the more fitter sides, and obviously the figures are there, I think, aren't they, where a lot of pieces have been written about it, haven't they? The fitness since Solskjaer's come in is obviously massively improved, so that could benefit us, as you said. It's a good point you make there, and it might actually go against I think of sides like Burnley. They spring to mind with obviously the deep block, perhaps not as fit and having to play games in those quick succession like you just mentioned, so that could go against some of the lesser sides. It's obviously a good point you make there. Our first game back is obviously Spurs away. Not exactly the easiest fixture, I think, to come back in with. How optimistic are you for that? And, with a fully fit squad now available, what do you think is going to happen in that game?
To be honest, I would have preferred playing them back in March when they had no Heung-min Son and Harry Kane.
Yeah.
But we've got Paul Pogba back to full fitness, Rashford too, and obviously the players all together, like our midfield and our attack, have had a few days up to a week or so to gel and get the chemistry going back together. But it's going to be really difficult because obviously, like many have seen the first game back in Bundesliga and in La Liga last night, and it's just not how it normally is without the atmosphere and with players just getting back to grips of their footballing lifestyle. I think it could be a bit disappointing for the fans wise in terms of seeing like a top level game being played between United and Spurs. But I would feel confident in seeing us overcome Spurs given their leaky defence. How I see it, I see that we could target their fullbacks easily through Rashford and Daniel James. And I would say I would still be confident, and the least I would expect is a draw away from home.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I think, yeah, as you say, we've got players back, as have they. 'Cause it's a bit of a fair game, really. I think everyone's in the lurch a bit as well, not knowing what it's going to be like. Obviously, with no fans, something a lot of these players, well, they've obviously experienced them in friendlies and under 23 football, but not in a top level game, as you say, which will be interesting. I'm confident, to be honest. I think and I hope we'll be all right. But obviously, it's, Spurs have been preparing vigorously as well. Jose Mourinho has been staying with his coaches. I'm not sure if you saw that. Didn't stay with his family over lockdown. Instead, was in a house with his coaches, which is interesting. So we'll see if a philosophical change may have been made there. We'll have to see. Obviously, the return of the Europa League and the FA Cup are also looking likely now, alongside the league, meaning our season is basically resuming in its entirety. How do you expect us to finish across the board in all those competitions, and what do you think would be a good season for us to finish with?
To be honest, I feel quite confident in the Europa League. Even before the current situation had happened, I was actually expecting us to go ahead and win the Europa League. But now I feel even more confident because if the situation of the coronavirus didn't happen, then we might not have had Pogba or Rashford back. Say if the Europa League final was to be, I think, around the start of this month, we might not have had them back at their best. But now, because we've got them back, and I think the Europa League and Champions League games are to be played at the end of the season, around August time, end of August. I feel we should be targeting for a Europa League trophy, to be honest, especially given that in the Premier League, our results, especially away from home, can be inconsistent. But given that the Europa League games aren't going to be played during the Premier League season, it would be just to obviously focus on the Premier League for the time being, and then if we need to get to the Champions League through the Europa League, then we would obviously try and aim to win it from there. And then in terms of the FA Cup, I do think it would be nice to win the FA Cup after some time, and it has been about, I think it's been about 3-4 years now, has it?
Yeah. I think 4 years it's been now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to see Ole finish his first full season at United with one or two trophies, as well as getting through to Champions League football next year, which we've not seen in a long time, and for us to play with good performances and good results. But I would feel with how our squad has the options finally in midfield and attack, that the best is yet to come from our team, and we do have the easier running fixtures for the Premier League wise, so we could have the options to rotate around, whilst the likes of, you could say, Spurs do not have the great options in midfield after Eriksen left in January, and then you could say Arsenal and Chelsea, they might not have the best options to have from the bench. So I feel we could now, because of Bruno's arrival in January, Pogba returning and Rashford returning from injury, we have options of Ighalo or McTominay. Depends on whether Fred is used as a regular starter or from the bench. We finally have these options, so now we can rotate around. So it's going to be important, as I was saying before, with the run of fixtures where United will be playing every 3 days or so. It would be we might have to just rotate the team around where all he uses is subs 60th minute or 65th minute rather than how he normally uses it in the last 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah. I'm not sure where you personally stand on Solskjaer, but a lot of talk about what would be acceptable from him in his first full season. Obviously, that's been put on hold for a while now, but obviously now everything's back, we can sort of talk about it again. Do you think should we miss out on top four and win neither of the Europa League or FA Cup, which is obviously still highly possible, where would you stand on Solskjaer for next season, or do you think he's already a shoe-in for this project and we should let him see that out?
I think I have been a bit 50-50 with Solskjaer, to be honest. I've always had my preferred option as Mauricio Pochettino, even before Mourinho came to United. But I would like for Solskjaer to just have next season, in terms of the fact that it would be hard for Pochettino or any other manager to come in this summer and obviously have the time to look at the squad, which players fit their project or not. And I think, to be honest, Solskjaer has just maybe, I'd say, 1 or 2 years for his full project to be completed, and we can see from there whether it's been successful or not, obviously through the league success and other success in the European competition. But I'd say it would be the best option just to probably let Solskjaer have another year if he wasn't to take us to the top four finish or win us the FA Cup or Europa League. What do you think?
I'm with you on being 50-50 about him. I think obviously there's a clear proof that he's not completely useless. Where there was a point in time where after the sort of the honeymoon period, obviously with him as an interim, there was a time where I thought, was that complete honeymoon period? Is like, what are his actual credentials? And I had serious reservations about that. He then showed us in big games that he's massively capable and that he's definitely got a blueprint for those games against the top sides. I think the only thing we need to sort out is how we play against the lesser sides and how to break down that deep block, which obviously we've seen a glimmer of how we can do that with Bruno Fernandes now in, but obviously we haven't had that over an extended period, so I'll be interested to see with the return of football now how we deal with that. I'm just curious to see how this season plays out, and I think the hypothetical I laid down for you there, in that no Champions League football, and obviously no silverware alongside that, you'd have to look at how that's happened, really, because we've got a really nice run in now, not all that tough, especially with Arsenal, given that they've got tough run-ins, and I think I'm fairly sure out of the top six we've probably got the easiest run-in. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe we have. So I think you'd really expect us to try and push for that top four place, and if we don't, I think you've got to look at who's out there. And Mauricio Pochettino, I think, will loom large over Solskjaer should he not achieve those goals this season. What happens with Newcastle as well is interesting, because obviously Pochettino could yet be taken off the market if their new owners come in and decide to remove Steve Bruce or what have you. And Pochettino, I don't think he's not going to hang around forever. That's the thing. He won't just sit around waiting for Solskjaer to lose his job. And I think Pochettino being off the market could be something good for Solskjaer himself. So we'll have to see what happens with him as well. Because Pochettino, we talk about Pochettino like he's almost like he's a Manchester United employee. We're constantly talking about him, and constantly his name's rung around for years, isn't it, really? Even, as you say there, before Mourinho came in, which was obviously back in, what was that, 2016, wasn't it? So, yeah, we'll have to see what happens with the season and with Pochettino. But as you say, yeah, I'm not completely sold on Solskjaer, I must say. Going back to transfers, one substantial bit of news that came out recently was the extension of Odion Ighalo's loan until January 2021. I personally think it's a good move. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think it's basically a no-brainer, to be honest, because the current situation was that Ighalo was to go back to China. It's been about 2 weeks, isn't it? So it's like basically having a one less player with no option to obviously get a replacement for him, even though he's coming as a loan player. But like every player counts, given the current situation where we're going to be playing a lot of fixtures from now till the end of August. Obviously, Rashford is back, so Ighalo might be playing less, but obviously we see Rashford more as a wide player rather than as a lone forward now. But Ighalo is obviously a good player to have because, for instance, you look at Martial, sometimes he has his rough patches, and sometimes he can just have those type of injuries where you just need him when you need him in games from time to time. Like we've had Martial injured last season, the season before, and it's just the way you want him to cement a place in the team and just be the type of player that we need for him to score 15, 20 league goals a season. And he's actually done well, Martial, given he was out with an injury 4 to 6 weeks back in October time. He's actually done well, and he has shown that in the past he's had good combination and good chemistry with Rashford, Pogba, and even with Bruno since he's joined the club since January. So with having Ighalo till January, I'd say it's a no-brainer, and a lot of big clubs in Europe, I feel, with a lot of other clubs in around Europe, of course, will be looking at loan deals this summer, because it is going to be hard to cough up, I'd say, 50 plus million on a individual, whilst obviously football clubs are losing out on money the last couple of months with no fans coming to the stadium and no money coming in elsewhere on and off the pitch. So I think it's really good to have Ighalo until January. But obviously United's main weakness is being able to be proactive. So like where they have to think of the summertime of who to replace Ighalo with in January, and they wouldn't think of that until it comes to the time of where they have to think, oh, Ighalo's leaving in January. Should we just panic buy and spend 20 million on him, or should we just keep an eye out, or are we just fine for now because Rashford is banging the goals in, and so is Martial, and so is Bruno. So it just for the short term, Ighalo is a good player to have, and he does seem to get along with all the players on and off the pitch, especially how we see it on social media. But we have to, in terms of if we want to become one of the biggest clubs in England and in Europe again, we have to be ruthless and dominant off the pitch.
Yeah. I think you've basically banged the nail on the head there, to be honest. As a short-term option, I think he's absolutely perfect. You know, he's obviously, we're paying a little chunk of his wages, obviously not the full wages, which is obviously a good thing as well financially. Although some would argue perhaps not, in that it's not money come out of the Glazers' pockets, but still. It's just whether or not. What do you think of Anthony Martial as our sole number 9? You touched on him there, saying that he's been quite good, and I agree. This season he's been decent. It's just, do you think Martial has got the capability to play as a number 9 in a properly successful United side?
I think he definitely can. His hold-up is really good on the ball, and he's able to connect with the central players in Bruno and Pogba very well, as shown since he's been at the club. And he's even gelled well with like the likes of Mata and Rashford, where obviously he might not be scoring in the league games week in and out, but he's shown positive signs when he's playing with these attacking-minded players when it comes to cup competition and also in the Europa League. And the thing is just with the Martial and Rashford, the issue has been what is their best position. That's the issue that they've had since Mourinho's come to the club. And you could say maybe a year around Van Gaal's time, where back then you would have thought Rashford was the perfect lone striker and Martial was the perfect winger. But now you look at it 2-3 years down the line, it's more of the opposite now, where Rashford is just more dominant out on the wing, and where he's just on the sidelines against the fullback one-on-one. It's just more easier for him rather than being up against two physical centre backs. And where it's now look at Martial, he normally it would be difficult for him to get into the game from the flanks. It would take him maybe up until the second half of the game, which is simply not good enough. But now when he's playing through the middle in strike, he's just getting more into the game, and his movement on and off the ball is amazing too, and you just gotta make the most out of it, which we are now finally doing with Bruno Fernandes, who's the type of player that just passes without a doubt. He just knows that the striker is just going to be going that way, left or right or through the middle, and he just does so.
Yeah. Obviously, one deal that's been done recently, or is looking at least imminent, according to most reliable sources, I think Fabrizio Romano said it's basically a done deal, is Timo Werner to Chelsea. Obviously, supposedly, looked like he was going to Liverpool, and then obviously he's now going to Chelsea. Do you think, is Werner a sign that you'd like to have seen at United? Do you think he'd have been a good player to have around?
I think you could say he's got a strengths that Martial has, but the weaknesses that Werner has, and where in another area where Martial thrives in. So, for instance, obviously Werner's more faster than Martial, and in terms of if you're like a high pressing team, maybe you could say Werner would be the perfect type of player to have. But then obviously it comes into a different league. You're playing in the Bundesliga, where all the teams in Germany are the type that like to press high up the pitch, and you can see how they play with a high line which goes up to the halfway of the pitch. And that's the type of situation where Werner tends to thrive in with his movement and his incredible burst of pace. And you could say, would he get that space in the Premier League where you're playing against the low block, such as Burnley? Who else is there? But I'd say Burnley is the best option for the time being because of how they are at Turf Moor and especially away from home. Like, it'd be difficult for a player like Werner to find that space. You could say he's a similar situation to Aubameyang from Arsenal, where he had a bit of a difficulty of playing as a lone striker, and then it's just that Unai Emery and Arteta have had to like shuffle it around, whether he has to be played as with two up front with Lacazette to help him out, or now you just see that Lacazette's just a lone forward and Aubameyang now has to be forced out on the wings. So it could be a similar situation for Werner unless he adapts to the Premier League straight away, or unless Chelsea just build a team around him.
In terms of incomings, obviously Werner isn't someone that is looking likely for an incoming, perhaps, unfortunately. One person we've already discussed in the podcast, though, is Donny van der Beek, with the European Lad, obviously telling us earlier on a bit more about him. What do you think about Van der Beek as a possible signing? Do you think he's someone that we need and that would fit in well at United?
Van der Beek is a very good player from what I've seen at Ajax and what he has shown with Ajax through the Champions League campaign from last season. But in terms of signing, it is going to be difficult with who we can attract and which type of players we are looking for, because obviously the season's not ended yet and there's no guarantee that we'll get Champions League football for next season. So some players might just reject us, and it wouldn't be a surprise no more, because obviously the name Manchester United does attract many players, but it doesn't do so as much as many fans might think, because obviously the players, whether they're the best in Europe or are on the rise, they are looking for teams that they can have regular game time in and are able to play in the best competitions such as the Champions League. But he's the type of player that would do well at United, but it would be really difficult to put him into the midfield, especially when you got Bruno as the number 10 in the midfield, and then you got Fred and Pogba, who are more likely to play a deeper role but would like to push up along with Bruno and the attackers. I see Van der Beek as quite an attacking type of midfielder, and I don't think he would be what we need unless we looking to improve the bench, because obviously we've got Andres Pereira and Jesse Lingard, and it's about time we get rid of these deadwoods and find players that we can find useful from the bench. But it's a bit of a difficult situation because you have to look at another area in midfield, so as for instance the defensive midfield position.
Yeah.
Like Matic is getting old, he's on his last legs. There's been reports that he has been looking fit compared to his last few seasons, but he is getting old. He's about 32, is he?
Yeah, I think he's still about that, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and then McTominay, he's not a natural defensive midfielder, so it is really difficult to force a play like a box-to-box type of play like McTominay into a position like that. What do you think?
I'm just wondering, what do you think is our best midfield three? What would you say is our best current midfield three that would work? Not player for player, but the actual midfield three that we should play in games. What would you say that is?
In terms of balance, you
Yeah.
have to look at Matic, Pogba, and Bruno.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But then again, it all comes down to the opposition that you play against, because Bruno could maybe play like, do you know how Bernardo Silva does for City, where Bernardo Silva sometimes plays in the midfield three, or sometimes he could play as a right winger, and maybe we could just put Bruno Fernandes into that position on the right wing only in the home games, I would suggest, where the other team is just like really sitting deep and you just want all your best attacking players out on the pitch. But yeah, Matic, Pogba and Bruno would be my main three at choosing midfield. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that midfield three. And I was talking about this with the European Lad in the first part of the podcast, in that as much as Fred has been excellent this season, and I think we all love Fred, United. I think as United fans, we've all massively, if we had doubts about him at the beginning, I think those doubts have been somewhat extinguished. To be honest, they've been extinguished, I should say. But it's a shame to think about a midfield without Fred, considering how good he's been this season. But I don't think he offers enough protection that Matic does. I think when you've got players like Pogba and Bruno, who, as you say, are more progressive and attacking, and you want to give them those free roles because we know how talented they can be in those sort of free attacking roles. I think you need someone like Matic in order to shore that up, and that's where my reservations of Van der Beek have come about as well. The sort of the similar of what you've just said. Is Van der Beek going to be that base of midfield to replace Matic? No, I don't think he is, to be honest. And I think when you look at, we've already got, Fred and McTominay at the minute, if we're looking at what we've just said as our best midfielders, Fred and McTominay are currently squad options. Do we need another player to go in there with Van der Beek? I'm not so sure. Although I have no doubt about Van der Beek's quality, it's just whether he's what we really need. So Van der Beek's one we've obviously discussed. There's been an array of other names that have been linked. I think Corentin Tolisso was one recently. Do you have any thoughts on Tolisso? I'm personally not a big fan of his at all, Tolisso, to be honest. Do you have any thoughts on him as another midfielder linked with United recently?
I think if I was to take the Leon Tolisso that we've seen, I'd take him any day of the week, really. But obviously, since he's been at Bayern Munich, he hasn't developed into the type of midfielder you would have thought he would have become, and his injury issues have been on the bad side of his career, where this is like you would consider where the age he would be looking to peak into his best performances. And the last thing United would need is a injury-prone player, as we've already seen the injury issues that we ended up having in defence and in midfield this season and over the seasons in the past. And it's going to be really difficult to see someone like him trying to adapt to the Premier League in terms of like how much game time would he get. Like if we were to get him, it would be maybe ideal as a loan option rather than as a permanent, because obviously Premier League is really physical and the game is just very intense compared to how you might find it at Bayern Munich and how you had it at Lyon in the past couple of years.
I think in a similar light to Corentin Tolisso, a good comparison that can be made is Renato Sanchez, who's a sort of similar ilk of player, I'd argue. Obviously now doing well in Ligue 1 again, Renato Sanchez, but had a torrid time at Swansea, to be honest. One of the worst sort of spells we've ever seen for a player in the Premier League. Which isn't nice to say about a player, but he really wasn't great. And I think those sort of players are what spring to mind when you think about Tolisso, in my mind anyway. And I've definitely got reservations about him as a signing. Obviously, these aren't the only names. There's so many names that have been linked. Obviously, people have got to write about something, and I think everyone likes throwing United in the mix to get a few clicks, to be honest. Obviously, Grealish, Sancho, and the likes all been mentioned. Out of the names that you've seen, sort of over this lockdown period, and the sort of a realistic window, what would your be ideal incomings for the next window?
It's going to be difficult because I would say it would really depend on how we finish the season, and obviously Champions League football makes a big difference to whether we end up buying a player or not. Like you've seen a lot of reports with the Telegraph, the Times saying on Sancho it would solely depend on whether United would get Champions League football or not. And he is open up to the idea of coming to United, and United do sound like they are enjoying a potential project of having him and Marcus Rashford as the key star poster boys, as you could say. And I would say the right wing area is one of the key areas that we need to focus on. It's ideal that we get a natural right winger rather than trying to put how I was saying before, Bruno Fernandes on the right wing. You wouldn't try enforcing him into a position that he might not be able to adapt quickly, and he's already thriving in the number 10 role, as he has shown from January to March. So I would say the right wing position is a must to cover before we can start next season. And then I would say we could try filling in one or two other areas in the squad. I would say finding a replacement for Nemanja Matic and also providing some competition at left back for Luke Shaw.
Yeah. I think you're spot on really with that. I think in terms of midfield, the thing we should be looking at next is a replacement for Matic, as I mentioned. I think Thomas Partey's a name that's been linked mostly with Arsenal, to be honest, which I thought was quite surprising. But I think Thomas Partey's a player I'd love to see at United. As you say, Sancho is another one, and Grealish. I think those three, to be honest. But as you say, left back position's got to be filled as well. I think we're in a bit of a tough spot really, because we've got a lot of spots to fill, and we've now got to do it at a time where, first of all, as you say, our finances might not be as good as first thought. Although, you know, I'm sure United aren't too hard done by, but also in a position where other clubs perhaps might not want to sell. You know, just their financial situation is as relevant as ours. If they haven't got a lot of money to go out and spend for replacements, I can't see, you know, sides wanting to sell their prized assets. And although, you know, we've seen Werner and obviously Ziyech, I'm trying to think what other deals have already been done. Sort of those are the only ones that sort of spring to mind. To be honest, Chelsea getting their business done early, but it's just who we can bring in really. It's gonna be a really interesting summer and a really interesting return for football. Asif, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for coming onto the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have you got any last words you want to say to anyone listening?
Well, it's been great. Thanks for a lot for having me on. I've not been on a podcast for like probably a couple of months, up to half a year now. So I've really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for having me on.
No, it's been great.
Hopefully United could end the season with 1 or 2 trophies, and we could have Champions League nights back to Old Trafford for next year.
Yeah, that's right. Spot on, mate. Thanks for coming on. See you later, mate.
Thanks a lot.